How the sun engineered every human skin color. You are standing in a pharmacy holding a bottle of sunscreen. The label promises protection from ultraviolet radiation. A few shelves away, there are vitamin D tablets. One product helps block sunlight. The other replaces something sunlight helps your body create. That should feel strange. The same star can damage your cells and support a chemical process your bones depend on. Too much ultraviolet radiation can injure skin. Too little ultraviolet B can reduce vitamin D production. And for hundreds of thousands of years, human skin evolved between those two pressures. But before we begin, we need to destroy one of the most persistent myths in human history. Skin color is not a biological border dividing humanity into separate kinds of people. It is not a measure of intelligence, civilization, or human worth. It is a visible trait shaped by many genes, migration, ancestry, culture, and the ultraviolet environments experienced by past populations. Similar skin tones can evolve in people who are not closely related. Different skin tones can exist among people with substantial shared ancestry, and the genes influencing pigmentation represent only a tiny part of the variation within the human genome. Skin color is biologically important, but the racial meaning societies attach to it was invented by societies. The evolutionary story is really the hierarchy was not. So how did this story begin? Not with pale skin becoming dark, not with dark skin becoming light. It began with further travel back more than 1 million years into tropical Africa. The exact timing is uncertain. Body hair does not fossilize. Sweat glands do not leave skeletons. But comparative anatomy, genetics, and the biology of heat loss point toward a major transformation early in the evolution of the genus Homo. Earlier hominins probably carried more body hair than humans do today. Hair protected skin from sunlight. It reduced abrasion. It trapped air near the body. But dense fur creates a serious problem when an animal remains active in heat. Humans began evolving bodies suited for efficient walking and running across open environments. Longer legs, a more effective stride, a larger daily travel range, and a brain that could be damaged by dangerous increases in body temperature. The solution was not simply persistence hunting. That behavior may have been part of the story in some places and times, but scientists cannot say that one hunting strategy caused human hair loss. The larger pressure was thermoregulation during sustained activity in hot environments. Human skin became an extraordinary cooling surface. Our bodies developed a dense network of eccrine sweat glands. When sweat evaporates, it carries heat away. Most mammals depend heavily on panting. Humans can release heat across much of the body while continuing to walk or run. This system helped turn exposed skin into a biological radiator, but every upgrade creates a new vulnerability. As protective body hair was reduced, skin that had once been shaded became exposed to intense, tropical, ultraviolet radiation. Now imagine the first generations living with more exposed skin. The danger was not one dramatic beam burning through the body. Ultraviolet radiation does not behave like a science fiction laser. Its effects accumulate: sunburn, inflammation, DNA damage, damage to the skin barrier, and chemical stress inside exposed tissues. One obvious explanation for darker pigmentation is protection from skin cancer. That protection matters. But cancer alone is unlikely to explain the entire evolutionary pattern. Many common skin cancers occur later in life. Natural selection is strongest when a trait affects survival before or during reproduction. Researchers therefore searched for pressures that could influence reproductive success more directly. This is where folate enters the story. Folate is vitamin B9. It supports DNA synthesis, cell division, sperm production, and early embryonic development. Severe folate deficiency during pregnancy increases the risk of neural tube defects. Laboratory and human evidence indicates that ultraviolet radiation can contribute to folate degradation through direct and indirect chemical pathways. This led to the folate protection hypothesis. Dark eumelanin-rich skin may have helped preserve folate and protect reproductive success under intense ultraviolet radiation. It is a powerful hypothesis. It is also not a courtroom verdict. Scientists continue to debate how much folate loss occurred in real ancestral populations, how deeply different wavelengths penetrated, what role diet played, and whether other pressures were equally important. These may include protection of DNA, maintenance of the skin barrier, defense against inflammation, and protection of sweat gland function. Evolution rarely acts for one reason only, but the broad pattern is clear. Under intense ultraviolet radiation, darker pigmentation provides strong photoprotection. The pigment responsible is mainly eumelanin. Melanocytes produce melanin and package it into structures called melanosomes. These are transferred into surrounding skin cells. Eumelanin absorbs ultraviolet energy and helps reduce damage to cellular DNA. It does not form a perfect shield. No natural skin tone makes a person immune to ultraviolet injury. But more eumelanin changes how deeply ultraviolet radiation penetrates and how quickly skin is damaged. Genetics gives us another clue. The MC1R gene helps regulate whether melanocytes produce more dark eumelanin or more red-yellow pheomelanin. African populations show remarkably little protein-changing variation in MC1R compared with many populations outside Africa. That pattern is consistent with strong functional constraint. In high ultraviolet environments, changes that reduced eumelanin production were often disadvantageous. Population genetic models have suggested that strong selection favoring protective pigmentation on mostly hairless skin may have been established by roughly 1.2 million years ago. But do not turn that estimate into a photograph. We cannot reconstruct one exact day when a pale ancestor suddenly became dark. The process involved many generations, many genes, and changes that probably began before the final selective pattern became visible. The safest conclusion is this. Dark protective pigmentation became the ancestral baseline for Homo sapiens in tropical Africa. Then, humans moved. Over many tens of thousands of years, modern human populations expanded into Arabia, Asia, Europe, Oceania, and eventually the Americas. They entered environments with different sunlight, not simply more sun or less sun, different ultraviolet wavelengths, different seasons, different cloud cover, different diets, different clothing, different shelter, and different behavior. At high latitudes, winter sunlight strikes Earth at a lower angle. More ultraviolet B is filtered by the atmosphere. For parts of the year, very little UVB reaches the ground. That creates the opposite biological problem. The skin uses UVB to begin the production of vitamin D3. Inside the epidermis, ultraviolet B transforms a cholesterol-related molecule into a vitamin D precursor. The liver and kidneys then help convert it into biologically active form. Vitamin D supports calcium and phosphate balance. Without enough of it, children can develop rickets. Adults can develop osteomalacia. Bones become poorly mineralized, muscles weaken, and severe deficiency can affect movement growth and reproductive health. Darker skin can still produce vitamin D, but under the same weak UVB exposure, more pigmentation generally means more time, or a larger exposed skin area may be needed to produce a similar amount. In tropical environments, that trade-off was usually manageable because UVB was abundant. At high latitudes, especially during winter, the equation changed. Natural selection could favor reduced constitutive pigmentation, not because dark skin suddenly became defective, because the environmental cost-benefit balance had changed. In the year 2000, Nina Jablonski and George Chaplin compared global ultraviolet patterns with geographic variation in indigenous skin pigmentation. The relationship was strong. Populations with long ancestry in regions of intense ultraviolet radiation generally had darker constitutive pigmentation. Populations with long ancestry in low UVB regions often had lighter pigmentation. In regions with strong seasonal change, tanning ability could provide flexibility, but the map was not perfect. Human populations migrate. They mix. They obtain vitamin D from food. They wear clothing. They build shelter. And culture can change exposure faster than genes can change pigmentation. Skin color was never controlled by latitude alone. It was produced by interactions among genes, ultraviolet radiation, diet, migration, and culture. Then, ancient DNA shattered the simplest version of the story. For years, many illustrations showed the first modern humans entering Europe and quickly becoming pale. But ancient genomes revealed that European pigmentation history was not a straight line. A Mesolithic hunter-gatherer from La Braña in Spain, who lived about 7,000 years ago, carried ancestral versions of major pigmentation variants common in lighter-skinned Europeans today. Genetic analysis suggested a combination that would now seem unusual to many viewers. Relatively dark skin and light-colored eyes. In Britain, DNA from the roughly 10,000-year-old individual, popularly known as Cheddar Man, was used in a forensic pigmentation model. The model favored darker skin pigmentation and blue or green eyes. That reconstruction is a probability estimate. It is not a time machine. Ancient DNA is often incomplete. Pigmentation is polygenic. Prediction systems are trained on living populations. So, the exact shade shown in a museum face is less certain than the headline suggests. But the larger conclusion is strong. Light skin was not universal among European hunter-gatherers, and the alleles common in Northern Europeans today rose in frequency at different times. How could darker pigmented people live for thousands of years in Europe? Diet may be part of the answer. Fatty fish and some animal foods contain vitamin D. Marine and freshwater resources could reduce dependence on skin property in certain communities. But the original script pushed this explanation too far. Not every European hunter-gatherer lived on a coastline. Not every group ate vast quantities of oily fish, seal's liver, and eggs, and no ancient menu proves that diet completely removed selection on pigmentation. A better answer is that adaptation can use several routes at once. Diet, seasonal behavior, clothing, vitamin D metabolism, migration, and skin pigmentation. Then farming spread into Europe. Beginning roughly 9,000 years ago, populations related to early farmers from Anatolia moved westward and northward. They brought crops, livestock, and ancestry. They also carried a derived version of SLC24A5, associated with lighter pigmentation. Ancient DNA indicates that this allele became common in early European farmers, largely through migration. Another light pigmentation allele in SLC45A2 remained much less common in many ancient populations and increased later under strong selection. That distinction matters. It means light skin did not appear across Europe because one day farming removed vitamin D from everyone's diet. The spread involved population movement, admixture, local selection, and multiple pigmentation genes changing at different speeds. Agricultural diets may have increased reliance on cutaneous vitamin D in some regions. But farming was not a single switch that turned Europeans pale. The evolution of pigmentation was a moving mosaic. The story becomes even more impressive when we look east. Lighter pigmentation evolved in East Asian populations through a partly different genetic architecture. Variants important in Europeans, including major effects at SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, do not explain East Asian pigmentation in the same way. Variants in genes including OCA2 and other pigmentation loci underwent their own histories of selection. Evolution encountered a similar environmental problem, lower or more seasonal ultraviolet exposure, and it reached partly similar visible outcomes using different genetic routes. This is convergent evolution. It is also why skin color is such a poor map of overall genetic relatedness. Two populations can evolve similar pigmentation under similar ultraviolet conditions while remaining genetically distant across most of the genome. And neighboring populations can differ visibly because selection acted strongly on a relatively small set of pigmentation genes. Now return to the pharmacy. Modern technology has scrambled the old relationship between skin location and sunlight. People move across continents in a single day. Millions live at latitudes very different from those of much of their recent ancestry. We work indoors, travel in vehicles, wear clothing, use sunscreen, eat fortified foods, and take supplements. A lightly pigmented person living under intense ultraviolet radiation may face a higher risk of sunburn and skin cancer. A deeply pigmented person living at high latitude with limited sun exposure may face a higher risk of low vitamin D status. But there is no honest, universal number saying that 80% of all dark-skinned adults in northern countries have severe deficiency. Studies use different thresholds, different seasons, different diets, different populations, and different laboratory methods. The risk is real. The exact prevalence varies. This is not medical advice to chase sunlight without protection. Ultraviolet radiation is a known carcinogen. Vitamin D can also come from diet-fortified foods and medically appropriate supplements. Individual needs depend on location, skin pigmentation, age, health, clothing, diet, and behavior. The evolutionary lesson is not that one skin tone belongs in one country forever. Humans have always migrated. The lesson is that biology can become mismatched with a new environment faster than natural selection can respond. And modern culture creates new mismatches for everyone. Indoor life can reduce ultraviolet exposure. Outdoor labor can increase it. Air pollution can alter UVB. Beauty standards can encourage tanning or skin lightening. Social inequality can determine who receives shade, healthcare, safe housing, or nutritional support. The biology of pigmentation may be ancient. The risks surrounding it are also political and economic. Then comes the darkest part of the story. Human societies took a continuous adaptation to sunlight and converted it into rigid racial categories. They treated melanin as proof of moral difference. They used visible pigmentation to justify slavery. Colonialism, segregation, and unequal treatment. Evolutionary genetics exposes the absurdity. Skin pigmentation does not divide humans into separate biological races. The global distribution is clinal and overlapping. Pigmentation has evolved repeatedly. Similar colors can arise from different variants, and skin color is an unreliable shortcut for a person's total ancestry. Your skin does contain history, but it is not a complete family tree. It reflects some of the places, environments, movements, mixtures, diets, and cultural practices experienced by populations in the past. It is not merely a receipt showing distance from the equator. That metaphor is attractive. It is also too simple. A better metaphor is a palimpsest, a document written over many times. Ultraviolet radiation writes one line, migration writes another. Diet changes the meaning, clothing covers part of the page, admixture combines different histories, and modern life keeps editing the conditions faster than evolution can update the text. You leave the pharmacy carrying sunscreen. Outside, the afternoon sun falls across a crowded street. Some people have deeply pigmented skin. Some have lightly pigmented skin. Some freckle. Some tan easily. Some burn quickly. None of these traits measures human value. None represents a higher or lower stage of evolution. Every person is equally modern. Every skin tone is the result of ancestors who survived long enough to pass life forward. The darkest skin is not primitive. The lightest skin is not advanced. They are different outcomes produced by selection, migration chance, and culture. And underneath the visible color, every human epidermis performs the same astonishing work. It blocks pathogens, prevents waterlogging, repairs injuries, regulates temperature, produces pigment, responds to light, and warns the nervous system when the outside world becomes dangerous. Your skin is not a racial uniform. It is a living organ negotiating with the planet. The sun did not create separate kinds of humans. It helped shape a spectrum, and the spectrum exists because one adaptable species learned to survive almost everywhere on Earth.